This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us on WZRD via Zoom, Zachary Dmyterko. Did I pronounce your name correctly, Zachary?
Yes, thank you, Judy, or Trudy. My apologies. How are you this morning?
Very, very well. Thank you. And let's try to not mention my name on the air because wizards at WZRD try to remain anonymous while we are on the air.
Of course. Thank
Okay.
you.
No, thank you, Zachary. And Zachary is the communications manager at RefugeeOne. Well, Zachary, I think that recently you've been extra busy with all the immigrants, the refugees that are coming in. We hear that many refugees have to live at the police stations now because there are not enough places for them to go. What's happening there, and how does RefugeeOne um, help in the situation?
Absolutely. So it's been very difficult past couple of years as the situations have unfolded around the world, increasing the influx of refugees, migrants, asylum seekers to the United States. RefugeeOne is the largest refugee resettlement agency in Chicago. We work primarily with refugees who are coming through a very specific process via the UNHCR, that is the United Nations Human Rights Commission on Refugees. Now, our work with refugees primarily focuses on those coming through these official channels. We do have a small asylum seeker program, but the majority that we've seen have been refugees from the Congo, for example, Burma, various conflicts around the world, and especially Afghans, who of course arrived after the Taliban takeover in 2021. And then now we're serving a ton of Ukrainians, about 3,300 Ukrainians since the war in Ukraine started. Those have been the largest populations. And as always, we provide them with full comprehensive services. This includes housing, this includes employment support, English language training, as well as we're one of the few agencies that helps with mental health services. Asylum seekers is one of our smaller programs, and that's the one that we always get questions about. Specifically, Venezuelans who have been arriving, but that is our smaller work. So we really aren't the experts in that field. We pass that off to our better prepared colleagues who specifically work with asylum seekers. Our focus really is refugees and those who have waited probably 2 to 20 years waiting to be resettled due to conflicts.
And are you Ukrainian too? Because I think we saw that there were some news reports about the Ukrainian refugees, and then we saw you there too.
Yes. So my family is Ukrainian. I was born and raised in the suburbs of Chicago. My grandparents, however, were all refugees themselves from Ukraine. They were fleeing the Soviet Union during World War II. And they, of course, made their home here in Chicago, where there's a large Ukrainian community. So I've been very involved with the Ukrainian community. I've worked in Ukraine, worked briefly as a journalist, and had a Fulbright scholarship there as well. So for me, it's an issue that is very near and dear to my heart. And I've seen a lot of struggle, especially with the war and what refugees go through. That's a lot of what motivated my line of work.
Mhm. So the RefugeeOne is one of the few agencies that has a mental health help for the refugees. What is involved in that mental health assistance that you give to the refugees?
That's an excellent question. We mainly focus on group therapy, individual therapy, mental health support, as well as there's aspects, because it's all wellness, there's also aspects of home visiting programs. And this is specifically for mothers who are arriving to the US pregnant or had recently had a child. So it's a whole area, because of course there's a lot of mental trauma involved with being forced from one's home. PTSD, anxiety, depression, even just adjusting to a new environment is incredibly stressful when you don't speak the language, when you're not familiar with the customs and cultures. So we provide individual and group support for that. I also want to mention one of the other things that we do that's very unique in terms of wellness support for refugees is dental health care. Now, this is a new program. We've recently opened up a free dental clinic for refugees because a lot of them suffer from poor dental health, having lived in refugee camps, or sometimes even been tortured. And so this is our chance to really work with volunteer dentists who are phenomenal to improve the overall health of refugees in a meaningful and impactful way. I can tell you, it is so many stories. There's been so many stories of refugees who have come afraid to smile, worried, and they're worried it'll affect their interviews for their job. And they walk away with a total new confidence, a new smile, and they're so grateful.
Mm-hmm. That improves their mental health as well with that dental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Confidence, building up a familiarity, it's all part of having an overall, better wellness, better mental health.
Mm-hmm. When you speak about PTSD, that could also involve people that are in situations of domestic violence. Could you tell us a little bit about how RefugeeOne helps with VAWA applications, and can you call those VAWA applications?
VAWA applications. So I can't speak too directly to this, but I can say that we do have intensive case managers. Mm-hmm. So these are specifically for cases that are incredibly difficult. These are people who maybe require a little bit of extra help. Maybe they did face domestic abuse or issues. And what that is that's an intensive team that fully supports refugees who need the extra help, for maybe they are struggling with something such as domestic violence. And we work with them and with the community, with partner organizations, with authorities to help really address any issues that may be there. We don't really want to expose too much information about the wellness information in specific clients, but I'd be happy to kind of follow up on that if needed.
Well, just in case listeners don't understand what the VAWA stands for, what does it stand for?
So this is the Violence Against Women Act, is a United States federal law that provides resources and support to survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. So this is essentially a program in place and resources in place to help women who are experiencing violence in their community or in their home or in their wherever they may be. So these are the resources that are provided to help them.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very necessary resource too, because maybe oftentimes when the refugees are in a vulnerable position, and then they have nowhere to turn when they face something, face domestic violence.
Absolutely. And I want to add that this is a process. You fill out an application, you provide all sorts of reports and evidence, and that doing so, while it is, difficult, it does provide certain benefits such as work authorization, protection from deportation, while their application is pending. So, and if this application is approved, the survivor will receive lawful permanent residence and be on a path to citizenship. So there is actually a nice hope that is added into this. There is something legally that can be done through these applications. It's more holistic than it might seem at first.
Right. Since you're dealing with all this, in order to have good outcomes, it is helpful to be holistic about these cases, right?
Absolutely. And that's what we really focus on here. It is a holistic approach to supporting refugees. From the moment that they arrive in Chicago, we're there with volunteers, with staff to welcome them, to be, friendly faces, but also to provide material support, mental health support, job support, wellness support, legal support. All of this comes together to really establish refugees to be self-reliant and to thrive in their new community. This includes even a fully furnished apartment. This is done with the help of volunteers, co-sponsors, families that are willing to give 6 months of their time to walk alongside and welcome refugees to the community. And this is so incredibly important. I cannot understate how much refugees benefit from being partnered and paired up with groups, be it family, friends, or congregations, to come together to support refugees. So if anyone is interested who's listening, this is an opportunity that we'd love to shout out on the air. Co-sponsorship at refugeeone.org. Please apply if you feel like you have a desire to help refugees.
And this apartment program, is it families welcoming refugees into their homes and having a portion of their living quarters so that they do have a place to go with furniture?
Excellent question. So what it is RefugeeOne provides all the housing, but we partner with co-sponsorships. These are families or congregations of about 6 to 10 people who get together and they raise funds and they prepare, months in advance, doing individual fundraising amongst their community to get the money to help furnish an apartment. And then as the family arrives, they partner with them for 6 months to help them in the ways that staff cannot, in the everyday things. So maybe sometimes it's like, how do we use the bus system here? How do we, learn how Metro cards work? What is a stoplight? Maybe we haven't learned, cultural aspects of the United States, or little things like that kind of get you learn by just living in Chicago for a while. So it's these little things and being a point of contact. We, of course, are here as staff to help our clients, to be their support, but it takes a community. It takes a village. And we invite others to be a part of this, to help and support refugees in the little ways that maybe staff can't always. So it's an incredibly important program. It does not require anyone to offer up their home. It doesn't require them to offer up anything more than their time.
Are there some neighborhoods that have a greater congregation of these congregations slash families that come together to help these refugees?
We've seen it quite well spread throughout Chicago. Of course, we're stationed in Devon, on Devon or near Devon in West Rogers Park. And this is where most of our clients live. They're about within walking distance of our headquarters. And we have a couple of satellite offices. So we tend to see a lot more participation and engagement from members of the community, from congregations, churches, family, friends in the area. Chicago, most definitely, less so in the suburbs, a little bit now in like Buffalo Grove, because there's Ukrainians there, but really it's all centered around Chicago and the north side of the city.
How does the RefugeeOne get its volunteers?
So that's an excellent question. We do have a volunteer coordinator who does outreach. Our volunteer program is quite extensive. We offer a wide range of opportunities, mostly focused on helping youth and helping as tutors or mentors. So we have an after-school program. Our youth program works very hard to allow children who maybe have come from very difficult situations, maybe really haven't had a childhood, to relax, play, and have a safe space after school and in the summer to socialize, meet other kids, improve their English language skills and homework. So we have volunteers who help with the after-school program here at RefugeeOne. This is in the evenings. We also have tutoring opportunities. These help refugee children or adults learn English, improve their English language skills, sometimes with homework if they're still in school, and then mentorship programs, which are a little more vast, and it really is more an adult-focused program that helps to acclimate refugees to their environment, gives them mentorship in difficult situations like jobs, navigating the various aspects of life here in the United States, maybe healthcare, maybe a little bit of mostly employment related, but it's a mentorship program. So with those opportunities, we have a wide-reaching ability to have volunteers contribute to the good work that we do. And if anyone's interested, please, you can always reach out to us at volunteer@refugeeone.org. That's email volunteer@refugeeone.org.
There are some sewing classes too for refugees that after they learn that they're able to start their business at home, making some money. are there refugee men too who earn money through sewing? And how, how does the process go? Are there a lot of refugees who are using this using sewing to earn a living?
So there is. We've seen this has been a long-standing program. We've seen a wide variety of applicants. There have been men and women. It's majority women, but there have been a few men, and they've been highly successful, actually. A lot of refugees have started off at the sewing studio. A lot of our clients and have built up a business over the years, have really built up expertise. In many ways, though, it is really a community building initiative. It helps to be able to share time and learn skills that not only are useful, but also build up a community. So the classes are fun. The women talk often amongst themselves. The men really build up their skills and get to feel part of the community. So it's a wonderful communal aspect to it. And this sewing studio does provide even tangible benefits, material benefits, in the sense that once a student completes the courses, we gift them a sewing machine so that they can continue learning and continue producing clothes, textiles, whatever, embroideries, garments, things like that at home. So it's not just, oh, here's the skills, but here's the means to kind of use those skills.
For Afghanis, there are for Afghans, there isn't it that they their culture does have a lot of garments or textiles that are unique to them. Do some of these Afghans are they already do they have that those skills in their toolbox already, or are they learning fresh at the sewing studio? Any of the refugees are, just are there some that already have the skills?
Yes, to answer your question, so that we see all ranges of skills coming through. Some people have had many experiences and have already been practicing some sort of knitting, sewing, garment work, embroidery, and then others come in with no experience whatsoever, and we see immense improvement. It's really beautiful because we get to sometimes kind of see and share in the creations of the sewing studio, and it's always breathtaking to see how much work, how much care, how much patience has been put into some of the work. But to answer your question in a couple of words, yes, it is a wide range. Some come with what would seem like years of experience in this and really excel and find themselves, and others, of course, started a very much a beginner's level and really build their way up.
So they're able to, do they do tailoring as well, or is it usually creating garments and textiles?
There is a little bit of tailoring involved. That's in the advanced courses. To begin with, it starts with just basic use of sewing machines and sewing, and a lot of it is garments. For example, back during COVID, back during 2020, masks were being sewn and sold by RefugeeOne. That was one of our biggest projects that was being done, and that was not only useful skills but also a useful item. Other garments include aprons, quilts, various when I say garments, blouses, shirts, all sorts of that. But tailoring is taught at the most advanced level, so hemming, things like that, which is a very useful skill, of course, here for both work and for everyday life.
Definitely. What is the most common problem for refugees to adjust to American society?
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
What is the most common problem that refugees face when adjusting to American society?
I think it's hard to say what is the most common, but for sure, the one that is the most universal and the most obvious is, of course, adapting and dealing with a language barrier. And that's why we provide English language training courses. Many refugees come to the United States with a very high level of education. Not everybody, but unlike in the United States, amongst, I would say the average American, refugees often have to speak 3 to 4 different languages, depending on where they're from. I know that, for example, the Ukrainians we work with often they speak a little bit of English, Ukrainian, maybe some speak Russian or even another language. But adjusting to life in the United States and overcoming that language barrier is very difficult. And it's important for everyday life, everything from shopping to being good at your job to understanding our healthcare system. So we really focus on English language training. We have multiple courses of different levels to build up those building blocks. Some people have not been exposed to English at all in their lifetime. And so we start with very basic. Some communities, for example, such as the Rohingya community, don't even have a written language that's not part of their culture. And so we even have to work in that kind of aspects of, okay, here is what, literacy, building literacy and the skills needed to thrive here in the United States. Other problems, of course, include mental health problems, as we mentioned, cultural adaptation. There's even been situations where refugees have come here and they've never seen an elevator. This is from probably the most rural parts of the world. And it's just interesting. It's interesting for them. It's a totally different world.
When the refugees start using their newly learned English, where do they usually use it first?
That's a great question. I would love to be there and present to see when their English is used first. I would say most often we get to see it when they come in with a smile on their face, and you can see that making an effort to speak English with us, to practice and show off the English that they've learned. And that's always very heartwarming. I remember there was one lady who her English wasn't really good when we first met. And then the second time I saw her, maybe a couple of weeks later, she said, "Zach, I am learning and I am studying at Truman College. They're one of our partners who provides English language classes for free." And she was so happy to show off that she's improving in her English. She held the whole conversation in English. And for me, that was just heartwarming. It shows really the progress that is made, how resilient people are, and how willing to learn they are.
What about soft skills? Does that culture trying to teach and help with the refugees absorb culture help with the soft skills, or do you dedicate some time and effort and programs to teaching soft skills?
We do. So one of our mandatory courses for refugees who have recently arrived is a cultural orientation. This is a way to really acclimate and provide those soft skills to refugees. This is everything from, what is credit? How does that work here in the United States? To what are the cultural norms? How do you interact with people on a daily basis? Some of the things that may be taboo or what's okay to talk about. Soft skills that really maybe we kind of overlook. And so we do have a full orientation set to that. And if they complete this orientation, we encourage them. It's mandatory, but everyone, anyway, we do provide a laptop at the end of it. So there's also an incentive, and it's a big gift that we're able to provide thanks to the generous help of donors and the generous support of donors who are here to build those soft skills and support the work that we do.
And you say that there are also computer classes as well, right?
We used to do computer classes, now a little bit less so. We do find that a lot of refugees actually have some computer skills. So that is no longer one of our larger programs.
Do you know what is the percentage of single refugees versus families of refugees at that RefugeeOne helps?
That is an excellent question. Most of the refugees who arrive with families. About 50% of our clients are children, and that's across almost all years. Really often, that is always the situation. And then of the adults, it's about 50% women and 50% men. Sometimes individuals do arrive, but often they're reuniting with family members who are already in the United States. We call those U.S. ties. So those situations are a little bit different. We often don't provide them with a co-sponsorship because they have family here to rely on. And often they have an easier time acclimating. They get plugged into the communities, to their communities much easier. But individuals is a bit rarer. We often see that more the case with asylum seekers. And that is one of our smaller programs, but we do sometimes see that. Speaking of families and how people are arriving here, Ukrainian refugees, for example, we see a very large amount of women and children. And this is a unique situation because often the men cannot leave the country due to conscription laws, due to need, men of a certain military age cannot leave the country. So there's a specific vulnerability that, of course, comes to being here alone as a woman with a child, and a hardship economically and socially. So we're very keen and look to support all families as they arrive.
Mhm. What about orphans? So do you ever have to, are you in a position to help orphans as well?
Orphans, we do not tend to see very often. I believe they are dealt with different organizations, more intensive case management. So no, not very often.
Mhm. How has the focus of RefugeeOne changed over the years?
That's an excellent question. RefugeeOne has been around for a very long time. It's been around since 1982. And the focus has changed in the sense that we look now to really provide a longer term of support for refugees. We've moved towards more holistic, from a more employment-based model to really caring for the whole person. Employment is a huge part of it. Housing, employment, and those are and English language training, which is part of employment, were the main core and still remain the main core. But now we've grown. As I've mentioned, there's a sewing studio, dental clinic, wellness support, youth program, cultural orientation. The view has changed to be more holistic. We've also, of course, been affected by United States politics. When the Trump administration came, refugee resettlement saw a huge hit to the numbers of refugees arriving. And this was really devastating to our program and to our clients. We did have a specific focus then on policy advocacy. As the administration has changed to the Biden administration, things have changed as well, and we've seen a larger influx of refugees. We're expecting about 42 refugee arrivals in this month alone, in the coming month alone. So that's immense. It also changes with the crisis. So Afghans in 2021 were the main clientele that we were seeing and serving. And that was a unique situation because they didn't arrive through the normal refugee process. The United States created a special process because the evacuation was so quickly to process them at these military bases in the United States. Things changed again very rapidly with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And with that, we've seen a large amount of Ukrainians coming to the United States, fleeing war, persecution, terror. And they've actually been resettled in a very different manner as well. They, for example, are here as they're sponsored by families and friends. So groups of individuals take financial responsibility for the Ukrainian refugees, but still we provide them with work authorization, with public benefits, applying for public benefits, SNAP assistant, things like that, as well as enrollment in schools, English language training, interview training. So our role shifts in that regard because we're not providing housing as a core element that's provided by their financial sponsors, but our goal remains the same. We want to help refugees become self-reliant and successful here in the United States.
Are there cases where you're not able to help these refugees? And if so, what circumstances are come up that you're not able to help?
I think often the situations where maybe we aren't able to help, I think those are few and far between. That would involve usually intensive case management. I think in every situation we've been able to help, because I think when I think of some of the harder cases, I think of one example, for example, Afghan refugee who arrived here. She was a double amputee. She had spent several years, or about a year after the evacuation from Afghanistan, in Albania, and no other organization really wanted to take on her case. RefugeeOne said, yes, we do have the resources and the tools, and we've been supporting her ever since. And this involved the whole community. We had staff here on staff who are Afghan, who knew members of the Afghan community, who came around to help her. It took her, for example, 2 hours to get dressed using her prosthetics. We assisted in helping her to get updated prosthetics and organizing some of the women in the community to help watch out for her, help her out with her daily chores, some that would have been really difficult now that she's without her husband because he had to remain in Afghanistan. Situations that are too difficult or that we're not able to properly address, then we refer out to some of our partner agencies or other resettlement agencies in the area, such as Catholic Charities, World Relief. And then it's really trying to approach it as a holistic problem, working with the partners in the community.
For the woman who's a double amputee, was she able to find some kind of employment to occupy her time?
So that's one of the things that's currently we're working on with her. She has not been able to find employment yet. We're working on her English language training, working with her to improve her English language skills. Additionally, we're hoping that, and she has a deep hope to continue to learn, to get a full education so that she can get a job that won't require her to do any heavy lifting. A lot of the first jobs of refugees are not always what they've been trained in. It's one of the sadder aspects. You know, people come here. For example, this one lady, she was an activist in Afghanistan for women's rights. She was well educated, and she had done a lot of work as a public speaker. However, in the United States, you know, her English language skills were not as good, and so she's improving, and she wants to study and wants to find a job that she can work at daily, given her situation. Many refugees. Oh, please.
No. You go ahead. You finish.
Many refugees, for example, have an excellent education and not always the credentials transfer here to the United States. And they start off in often hospitality industry, manufacturing. Those are a lot of the first jobs that they receive when they arrive here.
Do any of the refugees become teachers for in their language, like let's say teaching the Afghan language or other Rohingya?
That's an excellent question. I don't know of any specific cases, but I can mention one young client who's actually in college right now. He's from the Rohingya community, who he works with us. His English is phenomenal. And we occasionally contract with him as an interpreter because Rohingya interpretation is incredibly rare. So he's been an invaluable asset. His dreams is to actually become a doctor one day and give back to his community, which I find so inspiring. So we do work with him, and he has become a resource and an expert. His English is phenomenal. His Rohingya is phenomenal. So that's about the closest that we get. I don't know any specific teachers off the top of my head, but a lot of our staff and a lot of the interpreters that we work with were once refugees themselves. We have Afghan refugees who work here, Ukrainian refugees, Rohingya refugees. It's really a diverse staff.
So some of the refugees today become employees or volunteers at RefugeeOne.
Yes, absolutely. We see very often, after a number of years, clients come back and they start working as case managers, as interpreters, even in finance and all different departments here at RefugeeOne, because they were so moved. I've heard myself many times from my fellow staff that, you know, they saw that people who were here were doing good work, that they were helping refugees. They were so warm and so kind that they were moved. They were amazed that somebody would help them in this way. And as a result, years later, when they were looking for a job after kind of their case management had ended, they come back and they say, hey, I'd really love to work here to pay it forward, to give back to other refugees in the way that I've been helped.
Yeah, and they've been in those shoes, so they're the most they have a lot of experience understanding what the refugees are feeling.
A lot of empathy, a lot of experience. Um, it is it is incredible the stories you hear here. The lives changed, the experiences lived. Absolutely.
What is the most pressing issue now among refugees, would you say? There are so many issues, but is there anyone that just stands out?
I think what stands out the most is the legal situation of many refugees, particularly those who have arrived recently via other U.S. programs. And I'm specifically thinking of the Afghans and Ukrainians. They came here in the United States on what is called a parolee status. This is a legal status that allows them to stay in the United States temporarily for up to 2 years, but it doesn't really provide a pathway to citizenship or permanent residency. Now, why is this an issue? Well, a lot of this is an issue because, for example, in the case of Afghanistan, we're almost done with those 2 years. In about 6 months, anyone who has parolee status, who arrived from the start of the evacuation of Kabul, is at risk of no longer having any legal status here in the United States. But they can't go back to Afghanistan. A lot of them are persecuted. You know, this Taliban government is still in power. Ukrainians as well are in the same situation, though more recent and less pressing. They come from occupied territories where if they return, there is absolutely horrible things that could happen to them. They have really nowhere to return to. So one of the most pressing issues is providing these refugees with a pathway to stay here longer, whether it's a temporary protected status, which is often what is granted to many of these, but that's really just an extension, or to seek asylum, which is a legal process which you have to seek credible reasons, you know, provide credible evidence that you're persecuted, that there's a genuine fear of returning to your home country, of persecution, of fear of persecution or violence. So those are the cases that we're really worried about, because what happens?
Does RefugeeOne help with the legal documents, putting together the evidence of the persecution?
Absolutely. So we have 2 attorneys now on staff dedicated to these asylum cases, as well as a whole team that has grown to about 7 or 8 members recently. Paralegals, 2 attorneys, and a whole support staff. That one of their biggest things is working through those asylum cases for Afghans, which thankfully about 7 have already been approved and processed, which we're really excited about, but also working with Haitians, Cubans, Ukrainians, and a variety of others seeking asylum. The most pressing ones right now, of course, are Afghans, because they're coming up on that deadline.
What is the deadline again?
The deadline would be 2 years from when they arrived. So most arrived in fall of last year. So right now we're looking at about 6 months for the earliest arrivals is left for them to find a temporary protected status or an asylum status.
What is most challenging about your work for RefugeeOne?
That's a great question. As a communications manager here, it's often my job to tell stories, to listen to refugees and speak with them about their experiences, about what they're willing to share with media, with donors, with various different audiences. And while it is incredibly rewarding, I cannot understate how amazing the people are, how much I've been moved by my work here. There are a lot of very sad aspects to some of these stories. I often find myself, you know, really feeling really tearing up at times of how horrible some of these stories are, the suffering that a lot of our clients have gone through. So that's definitely a tough aspect. However, I will add that there is a silver lining I've seen as well, because one example was a lady who, she unfortunately lost almost all of her family in war. Her son was one of the few to survive, and he witnessed all of it and came through to the United States and really had a very difficult time here coming to terms with what had occurred. We ended up doing a couple of interviews. She shared her story, and over time really got to know each other quite well. And after a while, she said, Zach, you know, I really appreciate it. Speaking with you and telling my story has given me power. It's something I've wanted to do. And being able to open up has just been really healing. It's been really beautiful. And I'm grateful for that. So even though it's difficult, even though hearing some of these things is hard, it is so worth it.
Mhm. Yes, and the stories help others as well. It's almost therapy. You're almost being a therapist without any training, but you're all the empathy and all, and you heard so many other stories too. You're putting a lot of pieces together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it is so important for others to know. I think it's easy for us to forget what's going on in the world with how quickly media changes. So hearing these stories, hearing, you know, real life accounts that these aren't just refugees that are numbers, that these are real people with families, lives, a lot of whom never would have left their country. You know, some really had successful lives. I've met business owners, doctors, people who really love their life and were forced to come here because of a situation out of their control. So it's really important to remember that these are all people, real people who haven't always wanted to be here, who've undergone a lot of hardship and struggle to get here.
Mhm. How was the name RefugeeOne created?
That's an excellent question. It wasn't always our name, but originally it was, well, we had a different name. And the main focus on why RefugeeOne is we wanted people to know that we serve and help refugees. That is number one.
Mhm.
Refugees are the focus of our organization. We wanted to have a prominent presence here. We wanted to be very clear that this is the work that we do. And it's paid off. I mean, we've become the largest resettlement agency in Chicago, one of the largest here in Chicago, with a comprehensive amount of services. We've grown. We started in a very little building in Uptown, with a couple of offices, and now we have a whole headquarters that was recently built. We have 3 satellite offices: Buffalo, Grove, Norridge, and Ukrainian Village, all set up to work with the influx of Ukrainian refugees to the area. And we've grown. I think from a staff of about 35 people back in 2016, maybe even less people, 30, to now about 100 employees. And that growth has really just happened over the past 2 years.
Mhm. And let's see. If people want to contact you about the RefugeeOne, how would they? And also, if you are only concentrating on the most of the refugees that are assigned to you from the U.S. government, how would people know that RefugeeOne can also help them so that those people would be able to contact RefugeeOne?
Absolutely. So if you're interested in contacting RefugeeOne, you can always email info@refugeeone.org. And in the subject line, direct it kind of towards what you'd like. If you want to know more about volunteering, put volunteer in the subject line. Co-sponsorship, put co-sponsorship in the line. If you're looking for client services, put client services. And again, that email is info@refugeeone.org. That's REFUEERE. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. That is info@REFUGEEONE.org. RefugeeOne, spelled one word.org.
And one more question too. For funding, is RefugeeOne mostly funded by the federal government or mostly by other sources?
So this is where we're unique. We are one of the few agencies, and we really are proud of this, who is 60% funded by private donations and only 40% funded by the government. And this gives us a lot of flexibility to really do the work that needs to be done. We have a lot more flexibility to kind of adjust our programs and give funds in emergency situations to where it's needed. It's really wonderful. So we are mostly privately funded. 60% private donors, only 40% government donors or government grants.
And does RefugeeOne have to do a lot of outreach to get the funding from the private donors, or Or is it just that there are so many people that are interconnected and those that have more just want to give?
We do have both. We have absolutely wonderful donors who have come to us just looking to give. And if you're looking to give, please, by all means, we would love check out refugeeone.org/donate. But we do also a lot of outreach. Part of our development team is dedicated to maintaining donor relations, to reaching out to different churches, congregations, organizations, donors in our community, and putting on community events. So keep an eye out for us if you're interested in maybe learning more about RefugeeOne. If you want a speaker to come and speak to a group, to your organization, to your business, you can also contact info@refugeeone.org with the tagline speaker request. And we'd be happy to likely be myself coming out to speak to you all about the good work that we do and how you can get more involved with RefugeeOne and welcoming refugees to Chicago.
Wow, Zachary Dmyterko, thank you so much for joining us at WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM today and sharing the work that RefugeeOne is doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all the listeners. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Be safe.